Thank you. As you know, my name is Damien Montero. This is BOCAJS. Of course, we also today are joined by Jeremy from Palm Beach JS. Jeremy, you want to say something about the group, your group?
Put me on the spot, no. I'm too busy digging into my TypeScript issue. What?
Yeah. So we that's one of the maybe that's one of the things we should do one of these days. Have like debug our code live. Maybe that's not so exciting. Everybody thinks that's not exciting, and then everybody else is like, yeah, we don't see it. So Palm Beach Tech and Palm Beach JS and BOCAJS have, of course, merged virtually, and we both have the events in both places. So thank you if you're coming from regardless of which one of the groups. Hopefully you'll join the other group. Right now we have the same kind of events, but in the future, as COVID-19 hopefully disappears and goes away, we will start having the events more local to the different areas, downtown Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, and Boca, and perhaps even south of that. We meet first Tuesday of the month, and Palm Beach JS meets the last Tuesday of the month. We have some usually fantastic speakers, and I've gone out of my way. James, when I actually told Jeremy, which I was going to go, Jeremy, I have another speaker. It's some guy I know from a while ago, and he goes like, oh, who? James Q Quick. It's like, what? That what? So
he's YouTube famous.
Exactly. And I remember, James, I saw you like slowly grow and then just explode, and I'm sure you'll say like, it was nothing, right? Go ahead, say it. It was easy, right? So easy.
It's a lot slower than a lot of other people. I'll say that, but yeah, it's a lot of work I put in over the last couple of years.
It is amazing. It is fantastic. You can visit, of course, James Q Quick on his channel, as well as other things that he's going to tell us about. Please tell us as much as you can about different channels and different things that you have in Udemy and other places as well, I know. But enough of me talking. Let's hear from James, please. James, Welcome to BOCAJS and Palm Beach JS.
Thank you for having me. I think we first kind of mentioned this idea back in, was it late February? This is the last trip that I took before everything shut down, when I happened to be back in Fort Lauderdale for Code Camp for the first time in 4-5 years or something. So it's pretty cool to get back and see some familiar faces. I'm going to share the screen. One of the things that I would be curious, can I move this somewhere, or can I not? Maybe I can't. Can I pop out the chat? Yeah, I would like to keep an eye on chat. If you have questions, throw them in there. I don't want to just talk to you for 45 minutes or so. This will be like some slides, and then the majority of it, hopefully, is demo and like showing you code snippets and answering questions that you have. Just not knowing the group super well, I would be really interested to see, like, if you wouldn't mind sharing maybe your experience in JavaScript and maybe some of the technologies and things that you work with in the chat, and I will keep an eye on that for that information, as well as just like general questions as we go along.
Well, James, since you don't know the group well, just know that whenever you do a demo in front of Damien, it will fail. It's just kind of a rule.
Challenge accepted. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. I think I've done this talk several times. One of them didn't go quite as planned. The rest of them, fingers crossed. This is where I shouldn't say this. They have gone relatively well. So we'll see how it goes today.
Those are the ones I enjoy the most.
Yeah,
you get to see the real
where you
code
see the speaker sweat and everything. Yeah.
No. It's the truth of what's going on there. I really enjoy it.
Yep. Fair enough.
Damien and I will keep an eye on the chat as well. So if anything pops up and if it's relevant, we'll interrupt you.
All right. Sounds good. Well, one of the first things that I want to do is, I don't know what you expected coming into this talking about static sites, but the first thing I want to address is that static sites doesn't really mean static sites, at least probably not in the way that you might think. You hear static sites and you might think of something like this, just a basic HTML page with a header and a paragraph tag. Maybe you get something that's a little bit nicer with some links and a little mouse icon. Or maybe you go even a little bit nicer and you get this really fancy blog layout with the pink columns and things like that. Or
did you get that from yesterday? I presented that to the group as my design. No.
Is this your design? Yeah, I clipped that right out of the thing that you did. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
The next level of that, maybe you think of something like really, really cool, like the Space Jam website from the late 90s, which is actually out there. For anybody that's curious, you can actually go and check this out. But regardless of which one of Damien's designs you think of when you hear static sites, it's just important to know that things have changed a lot. The landscape of web development has changed a lot in the last 20, 15, 10, 5, even the last couple of years. It's an ever-changing field. And so static sites doesn't mean what static sites meant several years ago. And so today, I want to show you just how powerful and how dynamic your static sites can be when you pair them with serverless functions, something that I am very passionate about recently. Been spending a lot of time with serverless functions. So my name is James Q. Quick. We did a little bit of this stuff. I consider myself to be three things: a developer, a speaker, and a teacher. And I've done some combination of those professionally for the past 7 years or so. If you're interested in any social media or website, everything is James Q. Quick. So Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and website and YouTube and all that kind of stuff, you can find me there. In my day job, I am a developer advocate at Auth0. So you'll hear a little bit about Auth0 in this presentation. Basically, what we do is we provide services for developers to add security to their applications, adding authentication and authorization, and hopefully try to make that as easy as a process for the developer as possible. I'm also a Twilio champion. You'll hear a little bit about Twilio as well. And this is just kind of unofficial, not paid, but advocate for Twilio, which is a really fun company that I first got a demo of back in, not in South Florida, but I think in Jacksonville on Code on the Beach back in 2013, I think was way back when. Anyway, Twilio has been just an amazing, cool company since then, and I've been a fan. And so you'll see a little bit of Twilio in this talk as well. Now, I can certainly be self-promotional, and I can certainly go and ask you to follow me on Twitter. But what I will do is ask you to do that for a strategic reason that you'll see throughout the demo today. So what I am asking is that you take a second to tweet something that includes my handle, James Q. Quick, and then also includes the JQ Quick Talks hashtag. If you can throw that in there, and this is where I kind of, if I was in person, I would be staring at people individually to make sure at least someone is out there doing it. This will be part of the demo. So if you don't do it, it's going to be really awkward. And so hopefully you do by the time we get to that point.
And if you do it, you have a chance to win a license from JetBrains.
Yes. It's funny. Your voice for some reason sounded like the God it's echo voice. From, it comes out of nowhere.
Yes.
And if you do, chance to win. Yeah.
That's right.
Very cool. Looks like Todd and Eric are supporters of Twilio. Great to hear. And serverless was static for a couple of years. Very cool. Well, when we mention static sites, we probably need to start by talking about what that is. And there's a definition from Wikipedia, right? Most people read these out to you and kind of give you the verbatim. I'll let you read that yourself. But the things that stand out to me in this definition from Wikipedia for a static site is that files basically get delivered to a user on a request exactly as stored. So you'll hear me talk about this a lot. There's no real-time generation of these HTML files, for example. Those things are already generated, and they get served directly to the user whenever they request them. So this is in contrast to a dynamic web page, which is where you are making a request to the server. That server then makes a request to a database, takes that information, and then uses it to render or create some sort of HTML page. Question about the hashtag. Hashtag is JQQuickTalks. So actually, I'll type that in there since I've got it handy. JQQuickTalks. And then you got the handle right. So include the handle and the hashtag if you don't mind. So that is the definition of static sites according to Wikipedia. My definition is similar, but a little bit simpler, I think, in my mind. And it is, let me get my focus back over on the presentation. A static site is a collection of static assets that are served directly from a server or a CDN. CDN being a content delivery network. And this is, again, just kind of reinforcing the idea that you make a request to a website, and instead of there being some sort of things that go on, those files just get served directly back to the user. And so questions about what approach would you take to creating static sites? Well, you could generate HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for any of the pages that you need in your site. You could do that individually. You could also use a front-end framework like Angular, React, and Vue. And I haven't haven't done this talk in person for a while, so I can't see what everyone's reactions is to this, but I think a lot of people would start to question, why in the world would you consider Angular, React, and Vue, which are very dynamic frameworks, to produce static sites? And the reason is that when you have one of those frameworks before you deploy that thing or during your deploy process, you have some sort of build command that runs, and the output of that build goes into a build or a dist or a static directory or something. And those are assets that go and sit on a server or a CDN, and those get served directly to the user without any real-time generation on the server happening. So to me, those fit into my category of static sites. And so then the question becomes, well, what if you have a lot of pages? What if you need to do this for a blog? This is the standard example that people use for static sites. If you have lots of pages, well, you could create the individual HTML pages yourself, but that's probably not what you want to do when you get to scale. You probably want to look at something else like static site generators. And I'm not going to talk too much about these. You can go and learn more about them in general. But an example is I use a static site generator for my personal site. And I use this actually in a couple of different tabs on my page. Primarily, you'll hear about people using it for their blogs, their blog posts, and things like that. I also, if you go to my site, the streaming page, the speaking page, and the courses page are all static pages that come from a data source of some sort. And so I mentioned the data source. And the important thing is that with static sites, you still interact with some sort of data source. I'm not quite saying database, and I'm doing that intentionally for now.
James,
yep.
Is the benefit of a static site generator like that more like SEO rather than like having a single page app, running like React or Angular or something, but you get the SEO is generated on the server, and more, rather than being served on the fly through JavaScript.
That's definitely a big part of it. And I think I've got in a slide or two, I think I've got a couple of the things. But if you ask other benefits of static site generators, one, I mentioned kind of the scale. If you have a lot of different HTML pages that you have to have, instead of writing each one individually by hand, a static site generator can take a bunch of data and it can use that to, at build time, generate those pages beforehand. So that's one of the benefits. Another one of the benefits is you get the SEO value. That stuff, as Google crawls it, those pages are already ready. It comes back to Google. Google has all the information it needs to do its indexing and that kind of stuff. There's also lots of other benefits. Speed is one. If you think about making a request to a page on one of my sites, there's no connection to a database happening. It's not having to make a call to a database. It's not having to make a call to another service. It just sends that file directly back. There's also the aspect of that security is a big factor, where I don't really have a server that I'm managing. They're just static files. I don't really have to worry as much about preventing people from sending hacks to my server, to doing updates on our server, that sort of stuff. So it's a lot more secure this way too. So those are some of the big benefits of static site generators. And kind of back to the point here, there still is some sort of data source interaction. It just happens at a different time than when it would happen for a dynamic page, a dynamic site that we're probably more used to. So little comparison here between the two. Static site generators, they interact with a data source of some sort at build time. So when you go through the build process, they go to the data source, grab the information that it needs, and then generates pages based on that. The interesting thing about this, which is pretty tricky, and one of the downsides that people get tripped up a lot on, is if you have new content, if I add a new blog post, my site then has to go through another build for it to show up on the site. Again, because there's no real-time interaction with a database, if I add data and I want it to be displayed, I have to do a build. Benefits are speed, security, development experience, being able to host your site in a CDN is usually really easy. You connect to GitHub repo, you'll see that in a minute. You can kick off an automated build, and things are just kind of there. It's really nice. Dynamic sites, in contrast to static site generators, are real-time. They have real-time interactions with databases, for example. This means that there's no builds necessary if you have more content. So if I add a blog post and somebody comes back to the list of blog posts on my site, now, because that's dynamic, it's going to pop up because it's going to grab that from the database and display it. Benefits of this is there's no extra builds necessary. And this has kind of just been the way we've done things for several years. You think about the traditional WordPress site or like a Ruby on Rails or lots of different things that people might be used to. That's kind of how we've done things for the past several years. So if you're curious, there's lots of different static site generators. They've become more and more popular over the last, I would say a couple of years, last year, last 6 months even. And so there's several in here. The one that I am going to focus on and show you a little bit about is called Gatsby. And that's the purple one in the middle. And it's important, I'll kind of reiterate this in a little bit, but Gatsby is not just a static site generator, but it does have these static site generator capabilities like the other ones do. So this gets into a conversation about what the Jamstack is. And the Jamstack, if you haven't heard of that, stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And none of these things individually are really new. These are not new concepts. There's not really new things individually. But the real beauty of the Jamstack is some of the new tools that have come up around it. And then it's basically just a new way of how we combine these things to build predominantly static sites. And then we get into things like serverless functions to build full stack applications in a very different way than you might have been used to a few years ago. So if you've ever heard of serverless functions, if you've ever used serverless functions, you probably know serverless doesn't actually mean serverless. It really means that as a developer, I don't have to worry about the server. I can write a piece of code. I can ship a piece of code. I don't have to have the code for an entire server, an entire framework, or anything like that. I just write basically a function, and then magic happens. In this case, we'll see I'm going to host these things in Netlify. And as I said, I will have a function that's checked in my repository. Netlify will grab that thing and it will do magic. And that thing will now be a serverless function that is out there and ready to be used. Favorite GIF. Yes, I like this one. So the demo, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the demo is, and then we'll just dive into it. And then hopefully, or if you have questions, we'll kind of have some dialogue around that. And hopefully you enjoy the demo as well. So for this demo, I wanted to have a site where I can track all of the talks that I give. So as a speaker, you give a lot of talks, and I've actually got a separate thing on my own personal site, but this is a dedicated demo here. But a site where I can track all the talks that I give after going to a conference and give people links to slides and descriptions and titles and things like that. So there's a list of features or requirements that I wanted for this demo. I want it to be easily hosted. I wanted to have static pages for the information, the details about the talks that I give. I wanted also, and this was really important, to have interactive feedback. So I wanted people out there, hint, the people watching the stream today, to be able to provide feedback on the talk. And then for me as a speaker to be able to get alerted when new feedback comes through, and then take that to potentially hopefully make the talk even better in the future. And then lastly, I wanted this to be really secure. So those are the things that I was looking at when I was choosing technologies. And I want to walk you through the technologies that we'll look at. First and foremost, mentioned Gatsby being a static site generator, but not just a static site generator. It can do a lot more. And the way we use Gatsby in this case, which is based on React, if you haven't heard of it, by the way, is we do something like this. We grab all of our talks, and those are going to come from a data source at build time of some sort. And then we do two things. This screenshot is actually not the one I intended to have, but it will work here. We grab all the information about the talks at build time that we have. And then in this case, in this screenshot, we're generating the index page, a static page at build time that has all of that information in it. We would also then iterate through each one of those talks and generate its own static page for the details of that talk. Same concept of all the details or the full description of a blog post, things like that. And so the next step is figuring out, where do I store this stuff? And I don't know if you've picked up on it, but I've been really intentional of using the word data source and not a database specifically, hopefully to kind of open your mind, because what I'm doing is I'm using Trello to store the talks, the information about the talks, as well as the feedback that people give me. How many people, maybe not a show of hands, maybe I think you could do polls in Zoom, but maybe just leave a comment in Zoom. How many people have heard of or used Trello? If you haven't, it is my primary use case is just for like a Kanban board. Jeremy says all day, every day. Great. And what I do in mine, and you'll see a little bit of mine here in a second, is I track like a backlog of items. I track the things I'm working on. I track the things that I've accomplished. And I have all different kinds of things in Trello. And I figured this is already like a really nice user interface to work with. It's basically a database with a GUI slapped on top of it. Why don't I use this? It's got a nice API and it looks pretty simple. So inside of JavaScript, inside of my serverless functions, I create a Trello object, configure it with my private credentials, and then simply call an add card function. And I can tell it what the header will be and what the content will be, and it will create that card inside of Trello for me. I thought that was kind of cool. I could later on, if I need to, I could just go and open up Trello to see what information I have instead of having to build a dashboard or go and inspect things myself. So a similar process for when someone adds feedback, I wanted that to then give me an alert of some sort, so I know to go and look to read that feedback. And this is where I decided to pull in Twilio. Now, Twilio can do email with a recent purchase. Last year or two, I forget, but they do kind of programmatic email as well as your programmatic text messages and voice and things like that. So I wanted to include Twilio here to be able to, when someone adds a piece of feedback, go ahead and send me a text with that feedback in it so I can at least see it on my phone and I know that it's there real time. Hopefully you'll get to see that. All things, fingers crossed for the demo goes well. And inside of here, they've got a nice JavaScript package as well. You create a client, you call messages, call create, you tell it what the body is, you tell it what the from number is, which is a Twilio number, and then the to number, which is my number, and I get a text. It's pretty cool. And then I was trying to think about like what other dynamic looking features could I add to this? And I wanted to display information from Twitter and basically tweets that include a certain hashtag, hint, back to the hashtag that I gave you in the chat. And this is where, again, like I would stare people down to make sure somebody's done it so the demo works and is somewhat impressive. But I wanted to show that in a static site here, I can do very dynamic things like share tweets from a given hashtag, basically real time. Damien says, we did it. Thank you. Thank you for the support and for participating. So inside of JavaScript, you get a nice package here as well. With that Twitter client, you can call get, tell it you want to search tweets, and then tell it you want to search by a hashtag. That's the information that I go and search and then display that in the front end. Now, I was going to say last part, the almost last part, the second to last part is application security. And you'll see this demo here in a second. When I first did this talk, I didn't have any authentication process. So when I go into the site and actually enter a talk, people in the chat, in the audience were going and actually doing that themselves. Nice. And they were basically hacking the application and like adding, I think they did like some cross-site scripting and added like a alert that would pop up and stuff like that. That's obviously not what we want, but it was pretty funny. I think it actually made for a pretty interactive talk at that time. But since then, I've added Auth0 on top of this to do login and authentication, and then do an authorization in my serverless functions to make sure that I am the only one, or that only users with a certain role, which in this case is only me, have the ability to create talks, for example. So with Auth0 in React, they've got a package that gives you, if you're a React developer, you've probably seen hooks and the context API. And so inside of React, you can call the use Auth0 hook, and you can get things like information about the user, or is the user authenticated, the details about the user, and a couple of functions to call for login and logout. And that's what I incorporated in so that I can make sure that I don't get hacked when I do this demonstration in real time. So this is the last thing. Netlify is my very favorite host out there for static sites, and it makes it so easy to host static sites as well as serverless functions. And I mentioned this earlier with the magic meme, that inside of Netlify, inside of my source code, I can add a file, just like one function in a file. And because it's in a certain directory, Netlify knows to go and grab that file and basically host that in AWS as one of their Lambda functions. So this is an example of the add feedback function. This is what happens when you go into a talk and you add feedback to it. This is what gets called. Inside of here, it adds the comment to the Trello card, and then it just responds back with a 200. Actually, this is an outdated one because in this one, it also does the text message in Twilio to alert me that that's happening. And you can see in here, this is Netlify kind of gives you in their dashboard, just kind of shows you what functions it picks up as you deploy. You can go and see logs and things like that. So the only thing you might be interested in before we actually just kind of show you what I'm talking about is the source code. And I don't know if there's a great way for me to get out of the presentation. And I'll grab this link and throw it in there in the chat if you're curious.
I can do that, James.
Okay, I've got it now. So
yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So if you're interested, you can go and check out all the source code, and I will show you some clips now. First, another link that you will need, and I've got this one handy, so I can throw this in the chat, is this app, this demo, is deployed at talktrack.netlify.app. And so on this page, this is a static site where I can click on the details of one of these, and I can go to the static page for the details of that talk. Now, it just so happens, if you look in here, the list, this has been the same talk that I've given several times. So the information is not necessarily that unique, but each page does have its static page. So you can visit this now. You can go and see the information that I've got there. I'll show you. I will go ahead and log out, and this will show a login button here. So without being logged in, you will not be able to get to the add talk page. After I log in, I think this might take me all the way through. No, I have to actually log in. Here we go. Did I do username for this one? No. Feel free to send me a personal email if that's what you're interested in. All right, so I am logged in. Say what?
We'll have to blur that out.
Yeah, it's fine. I can get rid of the spam, but if you can, that would be great. Anyway, so after I've logged in, now I get the add talk process, and I can come in and I can add the talk that we're doing now. So this is static sites and serverless functions. Conference, I'd probably need to update this to just be event, something more generic, but this is BOCAJS. Is this a space between JS, or is it no space?
We are both, so you choose.
Both. Okay. All right. Space it is. All right. And then I don't really have any like great valid like date input in here. I'm just kind of typing in, and it's actually the 4th. So August 4th, the slides, I'm going to cheat a little bit and tab down and get that there. And then I'm going to cheat one last time. I think I copied the description for this talk earlier. Yeah, got that there. And I'll dump this in. So I'm pasting this in, and what I want to happen is I want this to save that information somewhere. And the question then becomes, after this submits, where does that go? And then that's where I'm going to swipe you this way and take you to Trello. So inside of Trello, I've got a card for each one of those talks that you saw. And if you look on these, you can see there's like a number of comments below. That's where we'll get to this in a second. But the feedback comes in and gets stored associated with this talk inside of Trello. So if we look at the very bottom here, I think we can scroll down and we can see here's all the information for the talk that we just added for BOCAJS. And there's no feedback yet, which I will require or ask that you participate in doing, even if it's just for fun. But that's where all of the information is stored. But if you come back to the homepage, you may have already done this, or maybe you haven't, I don't know, but you see that new talk is not there. And this is one of the implications of a static site. Again, when you add new information, you have to go through a build process to actually grab that information and generate, in this case, a new index HTML page, as well as the static page for that individual talk. So the cool thing, I think, is if I come into Netlify, into Talk Track, and I look at my deploys, you can see that it actually ran through. I wish I would have gotten here when it said building. Now it says uploaded. And if I scroll down, it's done all of this stuff of going through its build. And now it says the site is live. So this is finished going through an automated build. I'll show you how in a second. And now if I refresh the index page, now you should see, and you should see it out there as well. This is now the new static page for this specific talk. So I can click on this and you can see it. Now I want to show you a little bit of code in here. First of all, in that repository, you can go and kind of check it out in GitHub. There is a functions directory, and inside of the netlify.toml file, there's a configuration which tells Netlify where my serverless functions live. In this case, the functions live in the Lambda directory. Oh, this is kind of an outdated build. I think I've updated this, but that's okay. Anyway, the source code in these is actually in functions, and then it used to go through off the process in Netlify to rebuild so that now that information shows up. Got a question in the chat. Do you use testing with Gatsby? Can you use Gatsby with React? And also, can you use Gatsby with Apache as static files? So several questions. Do I use testing with Gatsby? I am not very well versed in testing, I'll be honest, in JavaScript. That is actually something that's in my backlog of something I need to just dive more into and probably, hopefully, create content around it. Can you use Gatsby with React? Gatsby is actually built on React, so some of their phrasing is React you can do in Gatsby. And that's where the power of Gatsby comes in, is where it can do the static site generator features, but it can also basically do anything in React that regular React could. Also, can you use Gatsby with Apache as static files? In theory, you can do your build in Gatsby, and then the output of that get hosted anywhere. So anywhere that you can serve static files from, you can host the output of a Gatsby build in whatever host you want to. In this case, I'm just using Netlify just because it's, to me, the coolest and easiest thing to use out there. All right, got a comment saying you did tweet. Thank you. Awesome. Didn't have to be an image, just the hashtag, hopefully, to catch that. And let's scroll back over here. So on this details page, hopefully a few people have at least gotten to this. What will happen? I'm going to do something a little dangerous. This is not, some people have already been participating. Thank you. A little ahead of schedule, but this is not typically what you would want to do during a live presentation, but I will take my phone and turn the volume all the way up on here. And if you go to this page and scroll down to the feedback section, you can leave a rating. This is a little widget that I built. You can leave a rating and some feedback and then an email, if optional, if you want to, and then send that. And hopefully in like 5-10 seconds or so, if somebody will send that, I will get a text from Twilio from that serverless function that will come to my phone. And hopefully it will pop up loud enough maybe for us to hear it. So if somebody could go ahead and throw something in there, it doesn't have to be real feedback, although I would love real feedback if you have any later on. But just for demo purposes, if you could throw something in there. People hear that? Anybody?
Yes,
I think just a couple. I see. Awesome. Yeah, I see some. Cool. I see some heads shaking. Yeah. So this is, let's see, I think about 3 have come through so far. So there's one before I actually turn on the volume. But, thank you. Yeah, so you can see that process is coming through real time to my phone, which I thought was really cool. And I want to show you what that looks like inside of the add feedback tab. When you send a piece of feedback, what it does is it adds that comment to the card. I always get confused which way to scroll in here. Sorry if this is too much scrolling, but I told you I got 3 text messages. I also have 3 comments inside of Trello. So that's where those things are stored. And then inside of here, I check for an environment variable. If I have a variable that says text alerts are on, then go ahead and send me that text message. And what it does is, again, it calls that Twilio client. It calls messages.create. We pass in the body. And I thought, this is an outdated version. I need to pull the latest code. Inside of the new version of the code, this actually displays the comment from the user. So I have that comment and I just text that directly to myself. So all of those text messages include the actual feedback. So I can just read it right here. Or I could go alternatively to the Trello board myself and go and look there. And that's it. There's not really a whole lot to that. Again, these are like just functions that are pretty simple to create once you get used to it. And then they're hosted automatically by Netlify and kind of taken care of for you. Now, the last thing I want to show you is, this is not real time, but it is dynamic, is I want to refresh the page. And you might have already done this, and scroll down. And you should see, hey, there's a lot of tweets in here. And I just wanted to kind of show you this because this is what we call a static site. And you can see already some dynamic capabilities of being able to like send off a piece of feedback and have it real time come to my phone and things like that. But also just to show you that on a page load, I can go and grab the latest tweets in a static page from Twitter to be able to display that information here. And the way Gatsby, I think the phrasing that Gatsby uses for this is you're doing a rehydration on the page. So if you think about a React component, this page is actually a React component, and that React component has a property that includes all of the information up here. So it has that from the very first time this page is loaded. And then subsequently, it can go and pull by asking, I'll show you this in a second, from my serverless function to grab the latest tweets from the Twitter API. So
James, will it pull them in live, or is it just when you reload the page?
It is, yeah. So I'm not doing quite real time. It is just when you load the page. You could, I just didn't set that up. Gotcha. So you could do a polling cycle if you wanted to. I don't know how the Twitter. I don't know if there's a easy Twitter API for streaming or what. I just haven't gotten to that point. But I could very easily just have this on a polling cycle, and every 3 seconds or so, go ahead and poll and grab the latest tweets. So hopefully people that are here, you see something that you put in and you believe me that this was not me generating this like pre-build or anything like that. This is coming in real time, which I think is pretty cool. So just to show you really quickly. Oh, sorry.
It's fantastic.
Thanks.
I have those Damien and Jerembo guys are. I think you made them up.
That could be true.
They couldn't be real. Yeah. Inside of
that cool of a voice and a cool of a name.
Now that's true. That is a cool voice. I do not have that voice. But just to show you really quickly in here, the last serverless function that we'll look at, I also have the test.js. I don't even know what's in that. Just like a hello world one. Inside of here, I think we probably saw this earlier in a snippet. If you get that Twitter client and you have all these properties that you use to create it, and then you call the get search tweets and it returns hard-coded for this hashtag. Thank you for using it. And it just returns those back. And then inside of the talk page, let me grab this really quick. Actually, I think it's in a template for talk. Yeah. This thing will include, this is a separate component, a component called search tweets. And this thing, if I get to the right source code, will basically when it starts using useEffect, if you're familiar with React, when this component loads, it will go and make that request to the serverless function, which is a relative path. And you can kind of do some niceties with redirect to make this path a little bit simpler. But the default is .netlify/function/ and then notice that this part here matches exactly the file name. So that's how this works is Netlify grabs that file, looks at the file name, and then hosts that at that endpoint. And that's how we make that request and then go ahead and display all of those tweets. So all in all, I really wanted to show just kind of the juxtaposition of having a static site, but how you could really add some dynamic capabilities and features to it. So I had fun just building this demo, and I've got like some wild and crazy ideas for things I would like to build in the future on top of that, or in addition to it, just other creative things. But my goal was really to do something that was like semi interactive as well, where other people can participate, do a tweet, see it show up, send a text, see it show up on my phone, things like that. So I'll do a little bit of wrap up here, and then if you have any questions additionally after that, please let me know. I did want to share, if you're interested in either learning more about Auth0 or collaborating with Auth0 in some capacity, there's a couple of different things that might be interested. We are really kind of growing our ambassador program. So I mentioned I am a Twilio champion. We have our ambassador program is what we call. And typically, if we were in regular times, I guess, we would provide financial support for people to go and speak at conferences, and you get to be kind of have some interactions with our team. And we're really encouraging people that are interested in like maybe looking at DevRel as a career. This would be a great opportunity to make connections with us, to get practice speaking, to get some support and coaching and that kind of stuff. So we have that program. We also, if you are a writer, we have a guest authors program. So on auth0.com/blog, we have guest authors all the time. And if you'd be interested in writing a blog, you can go check out the blog there. And then you could send me a message somewhere if you wanted to. And then lastly, we kind of had a little bit of a chat about the streaming stuff earlier. I am doing a lot of streaming on both my personal channel as well as the Auth0 channel. So we're really making a big push for online content, blogs, videos, and streams. And so if you'd ever be interested in joining for a live stream to do whatever, really, you could let me know and we could try to set that up as well. If you, a little bit on a personal note, if you enjoyed kind of the aspect of React and serverless, of combining these things together and hosting them in Netlify and building full stack applications without having to build or manage a server yourself, I've got a course that I released back in May, I think, called React and Serverless Full Stack Web Development. And we basically go through and build a completely authenticated full stack app using a service called Airtable, kind of similar in some ways to Trello, of having like a GUI to interact with and a nice JavaScript API. And build a full application, which I think is a lot of fun. So you can check out that and the other courses that I have at jamesqquick.com/courses. So last thing before pause and take any questions you have. Thank you for being here. Thanks for hanging out on, I don't know, what time is it there? It's 7:30 there, I guess. And if you have 7:30, cool. Questions or just want to talk or anything like that, James Q Quick on Twitter, other social media, jamesqquick.com has a contact form. I should start putting this on the slides. I've created a Discord server for my brand of Learn, Build, Teach. And it's really just the idea of trying to help bring people together to help share resources and ask questions and kind of learn together. If you're interested in that, I could throw a link maybe in the chat to the Discord server as well. But that's all I have. So if you have any questions or comments or want to hang out and talk, let me know.
Thank you, James. That was fantastic. Yes, please put the Learn, Code, Teach I remember when you were creating it, and it was just a great resource and great information. What is that? What do you do in the Learn to Code Teach?
Learn, build, teach, but Learn, Code, Teach would work as well. So it's a Discord server. Yeah. So similar to Slack, and we have a few things that we really encourage. What? I don't know what my dog's getting excited about. Yeah, this is where the demo failed. Everything technical worked, and then.
Oh my God, that was your dog. I literally thought it was my dog.
Yeah, everybody's trying to figure out where the dog is coming from.
Like, what is he?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really important to me is helping answer questions for people that have questions. Okay. Yes, I know. The other thing is giving other people a platform to share the things that they work on. So people share their blog posts, their YouTube videos, their streams, and really just trying to build a community around people that are interested in supporting each other, interested in learning. And most of it is it's pretty like web development related for the most part. So
love it. Fantastic.
The chat has a question from Eric. What learning resources would you recommend for Twilio?
Yeah, I need to maybe go back and check. Like I kind of stuck with I think just the docs when I was doing what I did. If you're interested in one of the articles that I have done on, let me see how far down that is. I've done one recently on using Twilio. I have to go to see how far back it is. Sending your first text message in Twilio and Node. So I'll send a link to this post just to show you how to do some of those basic things in Node. Twilio actually also has, I'm part of their organization. So you can follow the Twilio organization on dev.to and find some of the other content that they create, the other blog posts. They also have an amazing, I say this a little bit jealous in comparison to the Auth0 channel, but I think it's just Twilio. They have an amazing YouTube channel. So they have lots of good content on there as well. And they have grown. They're at 52,000 subscribers, which is wild. So they've done really well there. They actually also have an additional Twilio dev channel that they just started. Twilio devs, Twilio developer. Need to double check the name here. This is brand new. And I've already looked at a couple of their videos on here, and they are super cool. So that would be worth checking out as well. Other than that, docs I think are pretty good. So there was a question.
Zane had a question about what are your thoughts on Next.js?
Yeah, great question. So for people who were not familiar with what Next is, as opposed to Gatsby, which has really primarily gotten attention for being a static site generator. Again, you saw that it can do a lot more than that. But that's kind of where it's really found its niche so far, and kind of the branding has been associated with it naturally, I guess. I think they want to kind of get away from that branding. But that's Gatsby. Next is the ability to really mix and build a hybrid of static sites and dynamic sites. And dynamic sites in the sense of, if you think about your traditional like dynamic web page where you do have a server and you take in a request, you go and make a request to a database and then use that information to go and send back HTML. You can kind of mix that completely with the static pages that you would get in Gatsby. So personally, I haven't spent a lot of time with Next myself. It's in my backlog of, I've got a project idea that I need to finish. It's Christmas related, so I hopefully need to finish by November or so and start sometime soon. But my plan is to use Next.js for that. And you get really easy APIs to build, again, mix the static versus dynamic pages. You can get the SEO value where you need it. You can have dynamic pages where you need extra security or need to make a call to a database or whatever it is that you need to do. And Next community, I think, is really good. Gatsby's community is great as well. There's lots of resources. I actually have a friend who just finished a course on Next, and there's a couple of other ones. If people are curious, I can share some links. So it's top of mind for me, and I would like to spend some more time with it. So I don't know if that was specific enough for what people were looking for.
Absolutely. And Zane, more directly too, the Palm Beach Tech Slack channel. I know there's a couple people who.
So depending on the scenario of how many times you need to actually build your site, you would pay attention to how much time you would be spending, assuming you have some sort of limit on build minutes. In terms of performance, though, it like outside of after the build process is finished, then you get this really strong advantage of it's super fast. There's nothing that has to happen. It's literally just sending down HTML and JavaScript, and then it's there in the browser immediately. There's no real-time generation. There's no real-time communication to a database. So in that sense, these are super, super fast. And that is like, if you look at like Gatsby applications, the Lighthouse score, which combines a couple of different things, is like just by default, even if you don't do anything intentional, really, really good for that kind of stuff. So your performance is definitely going to, potentially improve. It's just going to be fast. And then you would pay attention to like how much time do you spend in your build minutes if you have some sort of limit. And then build time versus server calls. Yeah, I guess, instead of making those real-time server calls, you're doing those server calls in your build process, then you kind of compare. Just thinking about how often you would need to trigger that build and kind of help that base your decision on what makes the most sense for you. But that could be a really cool way to tie in Next.js, where you get the best of both worlds pretty easily.
Yeah, James, I think it's equivalent to like if you hard coded your data into the app, right? Anytime you're making a change to the data, you need to build and deploy.
Yep.
So, the same would be true if you had like, say, a static JSON file in your app that you were using as your data source.
Exactly.
But I also think one of the big, to me, the real advantage for static site generators is in SEO, because you can have unique, descriptions and SEO data, metadata on every page for something like a React site. But whereas you can do that, but you don't really, it's not always picked up. You can do that with a React site, but it's not always picked up by the search engines.
Yep, definitely. And that's where, again, like some pages don't need SEO, right? Like a user dashboard doesn't need a whole lot of specific things in there other than just dashboard. So like with Next, you could mix that and you could have part of it be kind of shipped statically, the SEO part that you need, and then go ahead and it basically makes like API calls to the serverless functions to load the data that it needs to populate it. But the data that changes is not something that needs to be like read by Google for SEO value and stuff like that.
Very cool. We have another question from LM. How does this work in conjunction when dealing with cross-site scripting, especially since you're connecting with other sites like Twitter?
Cross-site scripting, is this like a CORS question? Maybe I'm not.
I would imagine it'd be API keys and stuff that you would need to keep private.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Then this is the reason that I love serverless functions so much, and I have kind of a talk about how this progresses from my perspective and for a lot of people. Let's say you're building an application and you want to build a static site, and then you want to talk to Trello or Twitter or all those things, and there's private credentials that come with it. Well, you can't just throw those in the browser. You can't include it in your front-end JavaScript, because then you're vulnerable for someone even not even doing cross-site scripting, just inspecting the source code and going grabbing whatever tokens or secret credentials you have in there. So you never store that information inside of the front end. So then your question is like, where do you go? And as opposed to like building out or maintaining your entire server, doing an Express server and Node or something like that, now you can whip up these serverless functions which run in a server. You're just not responsible for maintaining it in any way. And inside of there, you can have all of your private credentials. If you look in, see one of these serverless functions, you can see I'm using environment variables all over the place. And Netlify gives you in their dashboard, you can go and upload your environment variables, keep those super secret inside of Netlify. I can have my source code. Anybody can go and look at this, and they don't know anything that they shouldn't. So that's been like my natural progression to serverless functions. Is I want to build and easily host a full stack application. What's the easiest way for me to do that? It's been serverless functions for me, because I can host it in a static site host like Netlify, and I don't have to go to a Heroku or a DigitalOcean to spin up a node server and manage that whole process.
James, I'm sorry if you already answered this, but are you actually using serverless, or are you just using serverless functions? Like, are you actually using a serverless framework? I think I missed that.
Yeah, so it's AWS Lambda functions behind the scenes.
Right, but are you deploying it using serverless, or they're just serverless functions?
Just serverless functions. So I don't know what the specific implications would be of using the serverless framework necessarily, but in terms of,
there's actually a framework called serverless,
right,
that allows you to easily deploy to like AWS, Google Cloud, and so I was like, so serverless with a capital S would be using that. There's that
the
actual
specific framework
called serverless.
Okay,
that,
gotcha.
Yeah, and
So
versus lowercase s, like you're just using a serverless framework, not the serverless framework.
Yep. So
It's like Microsoft saying MVC when it's a pattern and it means a specific thing in Microsoft world.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he's not using a serverless end or the serverless end, but some.
It would be So this is the cool thing, and this is why I love it so much in the Netlify world, is I'm completely abstracted from any of that. And I think there's some, like if I were to go and do Lambda functions directly in Amazon, there's other integrations with Amazon services that I could do. In this case, there's nothing I'm hiding. This is the code for the serverless function, and this is the configuration. But I think probably the answer to your question is Netlify has their own process of how they do it. And this is all I need to do to show them this is where my code is, and they take care of the rest. So I am not using the capital S serverless framework specifically.
Yeah, this is a lot more like using Firebase, using their cloud functions. When I used AWS, I used serverless to actually deploy,
Facilitate.
A whole, suite of functions into a bunch of different Lambda functions.
Yep.
Because in AWS, it's a pain to do that without having that, some tool.
Yeah, I had someone join me for a stream recently where he kind of showed me if you were to do serverless functions in AWS and you set up all of that stuff by yourself without doing serverless framework, there were so many things and there were so many technical things that I never wanted to even think about. As a developer, I'm not a DevOps person. I don't want to have to go and set all those things up. I want to write code. And in this case, I write code and like push it to GitHub. And I didn't show this necessarily, but this is integrated with my GitHub repo. So anytime I push, it goes through automatic build and everything's taken care of for me.
Beautiful.
Very cool. Zane has another question for us. In your opinion, what is the best web server to use for the server-side rendering with Gatsby and Next.js in production mode?
If you're doing server-side rendering, you don't really have that option with Gatsby. So Gatsby, you would either have like your static pages, and that's predominantly what I showed you today. And you can have dynamic capabilities, but it's all from it being a single page application. So those requests that you saw were coming from the front end. So Gatsby's not really going to give you the server-side rendering. That's where, so if that's what you want, Next would be the answer, where you can do server-side rendering, but also you can mix that with static site generation as well.
Very cool. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and ask the question they've been wanting to ask?
Save the best for last.
I like that.
Well, all right. Well, can you put up your slide again for how to contact you, Twitter and email?
Yep.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming out and giving this talk. This is a very hot topic, something that I'm very much looking forward to diving a lot more into. The Lambda side of things has been eluding me. I got the static side down, just not the dynamic stuff. So
yeah,
thank you so much for coming out and appreciate your time.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks
a lot.
All
right, very cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a good night, guys.
So if you guys have any other questions, thank you for coming. James, you're amazing. We definitely want to check you out on your website. We'll definitely check out also James on YouTube. I think I put it in the chat a couple of times. If you guys don't know how to chat, of course, you can see us all here. Just go to the very bottom and click on the chat button. You'll be able to get it nice and big and copy the URLs. Everybody's posting in their URLs, including James. Thank you for the events. All right. So if you guys, Marcus,
we got to wrap things up here with my usual spiel about what this community is all about, right? BOCAJS and Palm Beach JavaScript are communities for you guys. So we're constantly looking for developers to come out and speak about whatever it is you're interested in. You don't necessarily need to be an expert. You just need to be learning it and passionate about it. A lot of times I give talks and I've just learned something a couple weeks ago and I want to come out and give a talk about it just to solidify the knowledge in my head and potentially help somebody who's going through the same problem as I am. So if you're learning something and you want to really get good at it, consider giving a talk about it, right? We have talks from big wigs like Mr. James over here, and we have a bunch of local developers giving talks all the time here. So this community is really for you. If you have not heard of Palm Beach Tech, we are now South Florida Tech. It's expanding. It's getting bigger. Damien put in a link for palmbeachtech.org. All of that forwards to South Florida Tech now. Regardless, there's a Slack channel, and it is a very, very, very active Slack channel. If you're not a part of it, sign up now and join us on the developers channel and ask your question, right? If you want, people have been asking me a lot about how do I give back to the community. That's a great way to get back to the community, is post a question in there or answer a question that you might be able to help someone get unstuck on there. If you are looking for a job, there is a gigs hiring channel on there. Palm Beach Tech is, South Florida Tech, it's going to get hard to get used to, is a membership organization where it has large tech companies, small tech companies, and also individual members. So if you are an individual member and you want to get hired at one of these tech companies focused in South Florida, that's a good way to get connected with these individuals. And gigs hiring is your place to do that. If you want more of these types of events, Palm Beach, South Florida Tech is very active in doing a bunch of things. Check out the events channel or the general channel, and there will be other things going on throughout the month that you might be interested in as well. So that's usually my spiel for the end of the day. Wait, no, I lied. There's one last thing. I run a nonprofit organization called Code Palm Beach, where we're dedicated to teaching kids to code. And there's multiple ways you can give back to the community. One of them is joining a Zoom call like this and mentoring a student. We run through simple scenarios like code.org or more advanced scenarios like free code camp. And we're looking for volunteers to mentor our students in the ways of coding, just introducing it to them and seeing if it's something that they might be interested in, help foster that scenario. If communicating with a student is not your jam and you want to help out still, I've got a couple of open source projects that I'm looking for developers on. I created a typing tool called typer.palmbeachtech.org or codepalmbeach.org. And the whole idea behind that is to teach kids to code. And I snuck in some HTML and CSS lessons because being in the system, in the classroom with them, I noticed kids would hit the shift and then hit comma to try to get that open caret for the H1 tag. So this typer tool was to really get them hands on the keyboard and really figure out how to type while learning HTML and CSS. So if you're looking for something to do, give back to the community, reach out to me. I'm at Germbo on the Slack channel and on Twitter, and I would love to collaborate and have some more help with these open source tools for these kids. That's the last one this time. Thanks everybody for coming out. David, you got any closing words?
I do not. Did a fantastic job. See everybody next at the end of the month, the last user of the month, and then next month, the first user of the month. See you guys there. Thanks for coming. Thank you, James. You're awesome.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for hanging out.